Hello, I am Ernest, calling from OCBC Bank, calling you to inform you that there's a $4,000 transaction that's occurred. Was it you that made this transaction?
Oh no, it was not me.
Okay, do not worry ma'am, we will help you to get the money back immediately. Read out your credit card number, expiration date and CVC.
What you just saw was a reenactment of one of the top most prevalent scams that occurred in this town. Together with my team, we will share our findings on our data, as well as to propose the best classification model to help the police force identify victims of high, medium and low risk. So let's start with the big question. What is the most prevalent scam in this town? Well, we found out that the most common scams often involve scammers acting as a figure of authority. This accounted for 269 cases, which was more than half of the total cases reported. Analyzing the data we gathered, we first filtered out 50 people who were not scammed, meaning $0 was transacted. We found out that the most number of scams were online scams. However, we felt that this classification of online scams is just too generalized. If we were to implement effective measures to reduce the most prevalent scams, we will need to dig deeper into the types of scams we were targeting. As such, the team analysed the top 6 most common scams, and we identified that these scammers often played a role of authority. They often acted as officials and well-known trusted entities, such as the bank as well as different ministries. With the ability to punish people who do not comply, these scammers often use power play to scare victims into submission. Furthermore, given that these big corporations are seen as trustworthy, victims often let their guards down. Thus, with these considerations in mind, we have identified that the most prevalent scams are those that involve a figure of authority.
The typical profile of victims of scams that impersonate a figure of power include those with education levels that we consider not advanced, they are not good at computers, and belong to the age range between 24 to 34 years old. 255 out of 269 of them were sorted as not advanced. 194 out of 269 of them are not good with computers, and 134 out of 269 of them belong to the age range of 24 to 34 years old. The reasons that these individuals may fall for scams include their fear of the consequences of non-compliance, their inability to identify clues of impersonation due to limited exposure to digital media, and many of them are at the working age with stresses of work and need for orderliness with their personal matters, which may have clouded their judgment to realize it's a scam.
We feel that older people above the age of 63 are being underrepresented. The data is very less skewed with regards to age, suggesting that older people form a very small portion of this demographic at only about 1.5%. Considering that these are mainly online scams, we feel that this may not be the case in reality, because older people tend to be less digitally literate than younger people due to differences in exposure. While some do adapt well to technological advances, many do struggle. This is a survey conducted by the IMDA which shows that the percentage of internet users above the age of 60 pale in comparison to the rest of the population at 58% compared to 89% of all residents. Another study last year found that 77.8% of the same demographic were not comfortable with judgments given by AI based on their health checkup results. While all these do not directly point at older people being less digitally literate, it suggests that older people tend to be less comfortable and familiar with technology advances compared to other age groups. But forced into using unfamiliar technology like online banking, this makes them more susceptible to online scams. That said, then why does the data reflect otherwise? We feel that this still comes down to them not being digitally adept. They may be unable to identify these scams, or may not even realize they have been scammed, or do not know where to seek help, considering that information is again largely online. This results in possibly cases not being reported, and hence this demographic is underrepresented. We feel that this is an important and appropriate consideration which we have included in our filter model.
Now, Mr. Baramundi and I will walk you through our classification model consisting of 4 different segments. We will take a look at how the profile of a typical victim, as well as the underrepresentation of certain demographics, influence our classification model design. Looking at the traits of a typical victim, we have identified education level of computer literacy, as well as age to be factors affecting an individual's likelihood of getting scammed. Our group felt that the level of computer literacy could be highly associated with education level. As such, 2/3 of the traits being linked to education level, we feel that this is the most important trait. Thus, we have selected education level as our first conditional, computer literacy as our second conditional, to differentiate between individuals of low to medium risk. Our model also takes into account the potential underrepresentation of individuals aged 63 and above through the implementation of age as our third conditional to differentiate between individuals of medium to high risk. Our classification model attempts to classify individuals into three categories, namely high, medium, and low, with the corresponding values and descriptions on the slide. Next, we will move on to the assumptions we have made in the process of choosing our proxy measures for the model. Our model uses computer literacy as one of the proxy measures in identifying the risk level of an individual. We assume that if an individual is deemed good at computers, he or she is less susceptible to getting scammed. However, this might not be the case, given the lack of information on how the data is collected and what good at computers actually refers to during data collection. Having said that, we think it is fair to assume that someone who is good at computers is likely to be more tech savvy and should also be less susceptible to fall for these scams via an online medium. Our model also uses advanced education as one of our proxy measures in identifying the risk level of an individual. We assume that if an individual who has attained such a high level of education, bachelor's, master's, or PhD in our case, would be less susceptible to these scams given that they may be more critical of their surroundings, which in turn allows them to better identify a scam. However, this might not always be the case. An individual with an advanced level of education may instead be more likely to fall prey to such scams, given that he or she might be complacent. Having said that, I think it is fair to assume that the general population of individuals belonging to this category would be rational enough to not be complacent.
Now, let's take a look at the model's limitations. We label people with the highest risk of falling for such scams as not having advanced education, not being good with computers, as well as being older in age. In fact, the trait of being easily scammed is not easily quantifiable. However, by analyzing the dataset given to us and by using real-life data, we managed to profile such a demographic as such. We chose to have advanced education as well as being good with computers together in order to filter out individuals who are more likely to be exposed to media literacy causes, which in turn makes them least likely to be scammed. By having a model built in this particular fashion, we are able to better generalize these filters to fit other datasets in order to better determine the individuals who are more likely to be falling for such scams. For our conclusion, our model seeks to cover all the glaring characteristics that can be identified of a victim of scams which involves a figure of power. By also taking into account the underrepresented population of the elderly, we are able to better fit our model to tackle real-life datasets in order to retrieve the most accurate results. Now, let's take a look at how media literacy courses has helped Bethany to overcome such scams.
Hi, I'm from the Singapore Police Force. You have an outstanding fine of $200. Can you give me your full name as well as credit card information?
Are you trying to scare me? Not this time.